People thought they were reacting to a basketball game. That's not what happened. Somewhere along the way, the conversation stopped being about possessions, fouls, standings, or even wins and losses. Suddenly, every clip, every post-game comment, every replay started feeling bigger than the moment itself. And that's when things got strange. Because people weren't watching Caitlin Clark the way they watch most players. They were watching to see what happened around her. One hard foul became a headline. One reaction became a debate. One statement turned into another argument. And before anyone realized it, fans weren't even discussing the same event anymore. Some people looked at everything happening and saw proof that the league wasn't protecting its biggest star. Others looked at the exact same moments and saw something completely different, attention creating a spotlight so bright that every normal basketball moment suddenly looked personal. That's where this stopped feeling simple. Because once people stop arguing over what happened and start arguing over what something means, sports changes. And that's the part nobody expected. Not because pressure is new. Not because physical play is new. But because the reactions started becoming bigger than the games themselves. Every interview mattered. Every expression mattered. Every silence mattered. And this is where everything became complicated. Because whether people realized it or not, the debate wasn't really about Caitlin Clark anymore. It was becoming a debate about who gets embraced, who gets criticized, and what happens when one player changes the conversation faster than everyone else was prepared for. Caitlin Clark entered the WNBA with something most athletes never experience. Expectation before arrival. Not expectation to be good. Not expectation to eventually become great. Expectation to move attention itself. And that sounds exciting until you realize attention changes everything. Because once people decide someone matters before they've played enough games to define themselves, every moment becomes symbolic. Every missed shot becomes a headline. Every celebration becomes a statement. Every hard foul becomes evidence for somebody's argument. That pressure showed up immediately. There were people expecting instant domination. There were people waiting to prove the hype was exaggerated. And there were people who never really cared about the basketball at all. They cared about what her success would mean. That's what made this different. Normally a rookie enters a league and slowly earns attention. This felt reversed. Attention arrived first. Then everyone waited to see whether reality could keep up. And the strange thing is, the more attention grew, the less control anyone seemed to have over the story. Games became moments. Moments became narratives. Narratives became identities. People started projecting bigger ideas onto every interaction. To some fans, Clark represented growth, visibility, and a new era. To others, she represented the danger of one person becoming larger than the sport itself. Neither side saw themselves as unreasonable. That's why the conversation kept expanding. Because nobody was really debating jump shots anymore. They were debating recognition. They were debating fairness. They were debating whether success should change how a player is treated, or whether being the center of attention means accepting more pressure than everyone else. And this is where things started accelerating. Because once one player becomes the center of every reaction, every game starts feeling like it means more than the score. This is the moment people keep replaying. Not because there was one incident. Because eventually people stopped seeing incidents as separate. That's what changed. A hard foul wasn't viewed as a hard foul anymore. A post-game comment wasn't just a post-game comment. Every moment started getting stacked on top of the last one until people weren't reacting to one game, they were reacting to an entire feeling. And once that happened, every new clip arrived with history attached to it. Someone would see physical play and say this keeps happening. Someone else would see the exact same sequence and say this is professional basketball. One side saw patterns. The other saw overreaction. And neither side felt like they were watching different events. That's why the conversation accelerated. Because sports arguments usually reset after the final buzzer. This one didn't. The headlines kept moving. Statements started getting analyzed. People began watching interviews differently. Not for what was said, for what wasn't said. Body language became evidence. Silence became evidence. Even neutral language started getting interpreted. And suddenly every official response carried expectations people never used to place on routine league communication. Some fans wanted stronger protection. Others wanted consistency. Others rejected the idea that one player should become the center of every conversation. That's where opinions started splitting in a way that felt impossible to untangle. Because now people weren't asking whether a play crossed a line. They were asking whether reactions changed depending on who was involved. And that question spread fast. Media voices entered. Former players entered. Fans brought old moments back into the conversation. New incidents started getting connected to old frustrations. The timeline stopped moving forward. It started looping. And this is where everything became more emotional than analytical. Because once people believe every moment confirms a larger story, every replay starts feeling less like basketball and more like proof. This is where the conversation became uncomfortable. Because once people stop debating events and start debating intent, nobody leaves seeing the same thing. You could watch the same clip, the same press conference, the same reaction shot, and walk away with completely different conclusions. Some people started paying attention to expressions. Who looked frustrated? Who looked annoyed? Who looked supportive? Who looked distant? And whether those interpretations were fair or not almost stopped mattering, because the audience had already moved into something deeper than observation. They were assigning meaning. That's why body language suddenly became part of the story. A pause became a message. A short answer became a statement. No reaction became a reaction. And once that starts happening, people fill in the blanks themselves. Then media stepped in. Some voices argued that the spotlight around Caitlin Clark created impossible expectations and made every normal basketball conflict feel bigger than it really was. Others argued the opposite, that the attention revealed tensions that had always existed but were never discussed at this scale. Online, those worlds collided. Fans clipped moments. Accounts framed narratives. People chose which version felt true. And something strange happened. People stopped changing their minds. Instead, every new moment became confirmation. If someone already believed Clark was being treated differently, each replay reinforced that. If someone believed the coverage had become exaggerated, every reaction reinforced that too. That's why the divide kept growing. Because nobody felt irrational. Everybody felt like they were noticing something obvious. And that's where sports conversations become difficult. Not when people disagree, but when two groups become convinced they're watching completely different realities while looking at the exact same game. And this is where the conversation needs a different lens. Because emotions move fast. Facts move slower. By this point, there were official statements, media reactions, player comments, fan theories, and thousands of interpretations circulating at the same time. The challenge was figuring out which was which. The official messaging was relatively straightforward. League representatives emphasized player safety and condemned harassment and abuse directed toward players and personnel. Public statements focused on protecting everyone involved rather than centering one individual. But audience expectations were operating on a different level. Many fans weren't simply listening to what was being said. They were comparing it to what they expected to hear. And that's an important distinction. Because sometimes public frustration isn't created by a statement itself. It's created by the gap between the statement people received and the statement they hoped would be delivered. That's where interpretation entered the picture. Some fans viewed official responses as balanced and appropriate. Others felt they lacked urgency. Some saw consistency. Others saw inconsistency. The reality is that those reactions say as much about audience expectations as they do about the words themselves. And this is where things became difficult to measure. Motives are easy to assign. Evidence is harder. People can observe a statement. People can analyze a response. But assumptions about intentions remain assumptions unless they're supported by facts. That's why the debate never really settled. Because everyone could agree on what was said. The disagreement began when people tried to explain what it meant. But this is where the story stopped being about one player. Because leagues don't just grow from talent. They grow from attention. And attention changes expectations faster than institutions usually change. That's what makes moments like this uncomfortable. When a sport starts reaching new audiences, everyone wants something different from the future. Some people want the game protected exactly as it has always been. Others want growth to change everything. Some want stars. Others want balance. Some want the spotlight spread evenly. Others believe attention naturally concentrates around whoever brings the most eyes. none of those ideas automatically cancel each other out. But when they collide at the same time, every conversation starts carrying extra weight. That's why this discussion became bigger than one season. Because people aren't only reacting to Caitlin Clark. They're reacting to what comes next. If attention keeps growing, who benefits? If expectations rise, who adjusts? If one player becomes the face of a moment, does that help everyone or create new pressure for everyone else? Those questions don't have easy answers. And sports history shows this isn't unusual. Whenever a league changes speed, emotions usually arrive before structure does. Players feel pressure. Fans become protective. Media narratives multiply. Every decision starts feeling symbolic. And that's where identity enters. Because underneath every argument about coverage, officiating, attention, or fairness, there's another question people rarely say directly. What should this league become? That's why emotions stay high. Not because everyone agrees something is wrong, but because people care deeply about what they believe they're watching being built. And once a conversation reaches that point, it becomes impossible to reduce it back down to one game. And maybe that's why this conversation still feels unfinished. Because nobody really got the ending they wanted. The people who wanted everything to calm down realized attention doesn't shrink once it arrives. The people who wanted clear answers realized sports rarely give them. And the people waiting for one moment to settle the debate discovered something frustrating: there probably isn't one. Because this was never going to end with a final score. It was never going to end with one statement. It was never going to end with one replay. Something larger started happening. Not necessarily conflict. Not necessarily unfairness. But change. And change in sports has a strange effect. It reveals expectations people didn't realize they had. Who should lead? Who should adapt? Who gets celebrated? Who gets criticized? Who represents the future? That's why this conversation keeps returning. Because every new game now feels connected to something bigger. Not everyone agrees on what that bigger thing is. But almost everyone can feel it. And maybe that's the real reason this hasn't disappeared. Not because the league is breaking. Not because one player defines everything. But because once a sport starts changing faster than people expected, nobody gets to stay completely comfortable. And the story usually isn't over when people think it is.